Okay, just verify the identity problem. We work one side out and possibly the other side until both sides are equal. So the list of strategies that are in the section that we talked about in the notes, where first thing you can do is change everything into sines and cosines. So we can do that with the right hand side. Another strategy would be to get common denominators. So what I'll do is I'm going to get common denominators with the left hand side, and then I'm going to go ahead and put in the identity for the right hand side, and then I'll see where we're at that point and see what we can do further. Okay, so the left hand side, two fractions, we want to get the common denominator. The common denominator is going to be 1 minus sign and 1 plus sign. So I'm going to multiply each fraction by what it's missing. So the first thing we do is, here's the original 1 plus sign over 1 minus sign. We have a 1 minus sign there, but we're missing the 1 plus sign. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 1 plus sine theta. The other fraction, I have 1 minus sine theta over 1 plus sine theta. I have the 1 plus sine theta on the bottom, but it's missing a 1 minus sign. So I'm going to multiply this one by 1 minus sine theta over 1 minus sine theta. Okay, so I'm doing the same thing on top and bottom, so that way I'm not changing the problem. I'm multiplying by a power of 1. I get 1 minus sine, 1 plus sine here, 1 minus sine, 1 plus sine there. I get common denominators. Now on the right hand side, I mentioned that we're going to put in identities for those. We're going to change tangent and secant into sines and cosines. So this is going to be sine theta over cosine theta, and then secant is 1 over cosine. Okay, so then we put that in there, and then we can multiply that together, and that's pretty much all we can do on the right hand side. Now on the left hand side, there's a bunch of things I can multiply out. So I'm going to end up getting on the bottom 1 minus sine and 1 plus sine. So across the top I'm going to multiply that out. I get 1, and I get plus sine and another sine, so I get plus 2 sine theta. And then I get plus sine squared theta, sine times sine. Okay, now next I have a minus sign. Now because I have a minus sign, everything that I put afterwards I'm going to put in parentheses, because when I'm done, the negative is actually going to distribute through to all that. So it's important, if you got a minus sign, leave it outside, some parentheses, do all your work inside here, and then we'll distribute the minus sign later. Okay, so inside here we're just going to multiply. I'm going to pretend that negative is not there. I'm just going to multiply 1 minus sine times 1 minus sine. So I get 1 times 1 is 1. I get minus sine and minus sine, that's going to be a minus 2 sine theta. Negative and negative is positive sine squared. That's all going to be inside parentheses. Now on the bottom I get 1 minus sine theta and 1 plus sine theta. We'll see a little bit later if we have to do some more work with that. For now I'm going to leave it in the factored form. A lot of times you leave it in the factored form because something may cancel out. But we got to see what happens in this problem, if that's going to happen in this case, or if we have to multiply it and see if there's something else that we can do. For right now I'll leave it like that. Now on this side, if I multiply across the top, across the bottom, I get 4 sine theta over cosine squared theta, and then there's not much more I can do on that side. Now let's distribute the minus sign across the top here. So I get 1 plus 2 sine theta plus sine squared theta. That's minus 1 plus 2 sine theta, and I get minus sine squared theta there. Okay. And then if I look at the right hand side, I notice that there's a cosine squared here. I'm not going to be able to get that. Even if I were to cancel one of those out, that's not going to give me a cosine squared. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply that out as well. And if I do, I get 1, and I get plus sine and minus sine cancel, and I get minus sine squared theta. Okay, so now we're down to this step here. Let's see if we can cancel some things out. First of all, we see the 1s are going to cancel out there. We get a sine squared and a negative sine squared. That's going to cancel out. So all I'm left with on top is a 4 sine theta. That's good because I have a 4 sine theta here. Now what about the bottom? Now the bottom one, I have 1 minus sine squared. So again, when you get down and you can't do any more, you want to see if there's any kind of identity that you can put in. And there is an identity where the 1 minus sine squared is going to be the same thing as cosine squared. So that's one of your list of identities from this section when we covered this in the notes. That's one of your Pythagorean identities. Okay, so 1 minus sine squared is the same thing as cosine squared. So on top, we know that all that is going to cancel out, and you'll get 2 sine and a 2 sine, which will give you a 4 sine. Those are common terms you can add together. On the bottom, we said that we're going to replace all this. We're going to get rid of 1 minus sine squared, replace it with cosine squared, and if you do, then we get both sides are going to be equal. Okay, so sometimes as you go through, if you get to a roadblock where you can't go anymore, then start looking at your list of identities and see if there's something that you can put in so that way you can make both sides equal. In this case, I noticed that this side was cosine squared, and I looked at my identities and saw that there was a way that you can change a 1 minus sine squared into cosine squared, so in doing so, that allowed you to have both sides equal.